Hello, class. This is a short lecture about different ways that you can integrate support into your paragraphs. As we know, support refers to information taken from a source you use to research the argument you are presenting in your paper. It could take the form of a quotation or a paraphrase, and it must be relevant to your topic sentence, useful, and include an appropriate citation. It also, as we will learn in this presentation, must be integrated into the text of the paragraph so the paragraph reads smoothly and clearly and in a way that is grammatically correct. So there are two main ways to integrate support, and I'm going to go into more depth as we move through the presentation. The first one I already taught you. It is to use a signal phrase. A signal phrase is a grouping of words that introduces the quote or paraphrase and attributes the quote or ideas expressed in the paraphrase or the quote to the author or article from which it came. You don't necessarily need an in-text citation if you use a signal phrase because the author's name is included in the signal phrase. You can also embed the quote directly into the sentence. So you can continue a sentence you started by utilizing the most important snippet of a quote that you like. But keep the following things in mind. The sentence as a whole, including the quotation, must be grammatically correct, and you want to be careful about the portion of the quote selected. You'll want to use the most useful and effective part of the quote. So let's look at that more in depth. So for signal phrases, you're essentially introducing your support. So you can use the author's name. For example, in her National Geographic article, Cristina Nunez warns that the rapid rise in greenhouse gases is a problem because it's changing the climate faster than some living things can adapt to. You see that it indicates where the article is from. You could also use the article title if you want to, the author's name, the verb here, what she's doing, and then it brings in the quote. It's grammatically correct, but it also has those clear introductory words. If there is no author name, then you can just use the title of the article. So here it says, according to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption and natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy sources are renewable. You'll see, just for the sake of examples, the first part is a quote here, and then the second part I use a paraphrase. You can see that the paraphrase, because I wrote it in my own words, is not quoted, but I still have to attribute it to the source that I got it from. You can also embed the quote into the grammar of your sentence and make it part of your sentence, the quote or paraphrase. And also you not want to forget to cite it here because there is no connection with the original author or source inherent in this way of embedding quotations. So you could transition into it and use kind of a grouping of transition words, which is pretty simple. You see here I wrote, but more importantly, when fossil fuels are burned, they release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which in turn trap heat in our atmosphere, making the primary contributors to global warming and climate change. So you could see that we've got our transition and then it just goes right into the quote. Again, it's grammatically correct. And then we finish here with our in-text citation, which is the author's name in parentheses. That's all we'll need. Or you could finish a sentence with a quote. So you could begin it on your own, like I've done here. The water from the melting glaciers and ice caps, and then finish it with a piece of a quotation. Could raise sea levels significantly and quickly. And then again with the in-text citation there. So the whole thing reads pretty smoothly. The water from the melting glaciers and ice caps could raise sea levels significantly and quickly. It's a complete sentence, but you started it on your own and then threw in a quote from your source. Something that I do want to emphasize is the necessity to be selective when you're quoting. Part of being able to integrate your sources successfully is being selective about the material that you include. It's tempting to copy and paste sentences at a time into your paragraph, especially if the author of your source is a great writer. You'll want to kind of really use them to support you. But in the end, this is your paper. I'm going to turn on the webcam so you can see me say this. This is your paper. You are incorporating sources for your argument. Your paper should not be overwhelmed by the voices of other authors. So definitely keep that in mind. This is your time to shine, your soapbox. And your goal is to use the most useful information for your purposes and not overwhelm your argument with theirs. The following slides provide methods for selecting and incorporating the most impactful parts of your support. So here are 3 different ways to be selective. The first one you kind of know, it's to summarize or paraphrase. So instead of quoting directly, you can provide a quick summary or paraphrase of the information as long as it is cited appropriately with an in-text citation or signal phrase. And that was exemplified on a previous slide. You could select the phrases that you want. So the most impactful phrases from the part of the source you are paraphrasing or summarizing, and use them as emphasis. And then lastly, remember this should not affect the grammatical integrity of the sentence. And then you should use an ellipsis, or you can use an ellipsis to exclude part of the quote. So sometimes quotes are lengthy and include a lot of detail. As long as you maintain correct grammar, you can omit less relevant parts and indicate that omission with an ellipsis. An ellipsis is written as 3 periods, just a little dot, dot, dot. Here are some examples of the processes described on the previous page. We obviously know about summary and paraphrase, so I use the same example, but being selective about the phrases you want could be a little bit new to you. So as an example, I have here, according to Christina Nunez, you can see we've used a signal phrase here. Our carbon emissions are, let's begin the sentence, changing the climate faster than some living things can adapt to, and presenting, that's my words, right? I'm selecting the phrases I want and kind of using them as building blocks of my sentence, and presenting unique challenges to all life. So those are 2 different snippets of quotes from the same area of her essay and or her article. And what I've done was kind of like knit them into my sentence and use them as building blocks. You can also use an ellipsis to exclude part of the quote as exemplified here. It says the Environmental Protection Agency's website page, Climate Change Indicators in the United States, points out that more extreme climate events, ... are already happening. So I've left out some details that they've included in the middle of, or in that quotation, so that I can just use the most important part for me. One last thing before I sign off here is that sometimes the support needs a little bit of additional contextualization in order to make sense to the audience. So this is just one more thing to keep in mind as you go through and fine tune your essay. So sometimes, for example, when you are using information from a study, sometimes it's not clear how that information came about, and you might want to indicate the general premise of that study. When you're introducing a source for the first time, it might be useful to explain more about this source. Like, is it an article? Is it a study government website where it was published? And also, if the bit of support you're using relies on background information to make sense. So we don't want to pull support from your source if you needed to learn more about it in order to get that support, if that makes sense. So just keep those things in mind. Thank you for watching this. I'm going to make a separate video with an example and explanation that I will go through and post that separately.